Welcome back. It's Marjorie from the Red Resistance Podcast. Unfortunately, it is going to be just me for this season, but it's the final season of The Handmaid's Tale. Roxy and Scarlett are going to be desperately missed, and I will try my best to channel their thoughts. We've been doing this podcast long enough that I can kind of know how they would take certain scenes. They have watched the episodes, and we've kind of bounced some stuff off of each other a little bit, but it's just going to be me carrying this torch to the end of this season. We, with all the air quotes, are going to be doing some kind of testaments coverage as we go on. I'm definitely going to go read this book again after the season because that is the time to do it. There was a little bit of me that wanted to reread it going into the season because I think that the Testaments is going to be really big throughout the season, obviously. Like they're going to bridge these two series together in a way that I'm sure is going to be really, really incredibly smart and cool. And I don't know how they're going to do it, but I'm excited to kind of watch the groundwork as it's playing out in season 6. That being said, this podcast loves to spoil the Testaments, and I'm going to continue to do that. If you don't want to know what happens in that book, or you don't want to know what's going to happen in that series potentially, then you do not want to watch this podcast. They've got a cast and they're going to be filming soon, so obviously I have no idea what's going to be in the Testaments other than what's in the book. But I will reference the book throughout this analysis of season 6. So if you don't want to know what happens in that book, this is not the podcast for you. If you don't mind being spoiled about the Testaments and you want to watch this groundwork and this bridge being laid to this new series and the sequel and finally the end of Gilead, then this is the podcast for you. It's going to play a role of some sort in the conclusion of the series, so I'm going to reread it and we will do some kind of new look at the Testaments now that The Handmaid's Tale has been concluded. But that is once The Handmaid's Tale has been concluded, and we need to get into the first episode. So, this episode is written by Nika Castillo and Bruce Miller and directed by Elizabeth Moss. I am such a fan of Elizabeth Moss's directing. She's done several episodes at this point, and she's just so good. I wish I had better words to describe what I'm seeing that I'm sure a directorial things. I don't know the right language to describe what I'm seeing all the time, but I'll try my best to kind of break it down because there's so many nuanced little things throughout this episode that I didn't pick up on the first watch that really blew my mind on the rewatch. Well, starting with the first line, but we'll get there. We'll get there. I have a couple more initial thoughts. First of all, the episode is called Train, and the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, fine, it's a train. They're on a train. It's essentially a bottle episode, and they're on a train, so fair train. But rewatching it, I got a whole lot more out of this title. First of all, the train itself is kind of its own entity within the episode. It serves kind of as a plot device and as like a pacing device. It definitely like sets the feel for a lot of scenes. You get this like claustrophobic feeling towards the end as Serena's getting like enclosed in on. They do really cool things with the fact that they're filming on this moving train. If they're I don't know if they're really filming on a moving train, but you know, the fact that they have this moving train throughout this episode, they really use that. Also, with Train, okay, I'm going to spoil the ending of this episode. So, again, if you have not seen the end of this episode yet, stop listening to my dumb face and go watch this episode because you should see the ending as untainted of any kind of spoiler as possible because I think how they set up this ending in this episode is what is done so well. And I don't want anyone to be ruined for this. I really hope everyone got to see the ending just the way they meant it on the show because it really was so incredibly well done. So let's talk about this ending. June is reunited with Holly, and I just didn't see it coming. I didn't even see it coming when they showed Holly the first time. I was like, yep, doctor, she's a medical. I was thinking of other things. I did not see it coming. And then once you see her and it hits you, it is just gut-wrenchingly beautiful because it's a hard episode. It's a hard episode by the end. June's really at her rock bottom, and it's just beautiful. And I didn't see it coming. And I when I finished the episode, I texted Scarlett and I was like, you need to go watch this right now. And I don't want to tell you anything else about it. Just go watch this first episode and then come talk to me because I need someone to talk to because God, it was so good. But when I went and did the rewatch, I realized how many seeds they had planted throughout the episode just to kind of prepare your brain for that final ending. And so we'll get into it. I'll talk about it through the episode. One thing is kind of like a little bit of a stretch, but I did think it was kind of interesting. Season 2, episode 3, Baggage, we'd get some Holly flashbacks in that one, and it's really June kind of unpacking her relationship with her mother as she leaves Hannah. And she says like she had to leave me and now I have to leave her. And you're feeling the weight of that guilt and that trauma that June still has. Like that's still her thing. She still has to leave Hannah. She's going further away from Hannah. But she says it at the end of season 5. If she doesn't, she can't fight for Hannah and she can't help Hannah if she's dead. So she's got to flee because she's fleeing for her life. And so you have these like two very, very similar mental states that June's in. The first one, so season 2, it's called Baggage, and this one is called Train. And I just feel like it's June with all that baggage that she has of her guilt of leaving her child, of the guilt she has of the relationship with her mother being as strained as it was and unresolved. They just got ripped apart and didn't get any kind of closure or goodbye or anything. And now she's got all this baggage as she travels on this train. And at the end, she's going to be reunited with her mother and she'll finally get to unpack some of that baggage. So it's probably a stretch, but I did find that one interesting as well. One other thought I have about this episode in the title is I don't know what qualifies. It might be disqualified as a bottle episode because there are two scenes that we travel elsewhere off of this train. But it's pretty close to a bottle episode. So obviously, mostly they're on the train. It's June and Serena. And oh, side note, like June and Serena, God, it's so great. We're going to get it in the next episode too. It's a pretty June and Serena heavy episode. I'll talk about episode 2 in the next episode. But this episode is June and Serena heavy and they get to interact together. And there's just nothing better than these two actresses in a scene. They're just excellent. And as characters, it's really fun to watch. And as actors, it's really fun to watch their deliveries and some of these lines and the faces that June makes. Oh, they're so good. So I honestly, I think it's like a unanimous. I don't think there's anyone that doesn't love these two women in the show together in a scene. So this is really great to have a bottle episode where it's just the two of them kind of working through their shit. And we'll see their journey as we go through. Anyway, there's two scenes where we exit and so we go and we check in with Moira and Tuello and then we check in with Nick, and at first I thought I was like really stretching to make train work in both of those scenes, and then I looked at the way that they cut it and I'm like, no, this that had to be at least intentional. I really think that was intentional. So let's just get into this episode and you can tell me how far I'm stretching this train through all these scenes. So the scene starts out with these like sweeping shots of Canada, and you get this train coming through. The sun is rising. We know that season 5 ended like right before sunrise. It's kind of hard to tell exactly what time it was, but they were trying to catch a flight for midnight, I believe. And so you figure by the time they got to the train station with Tuello and boarded the train, Luke turns himself in, the train takes off. It had to have been somewhere around midnight, closer to sunrise. We are going to pick up more or less exactly where we left off, and I'm pretty sure every season has done that. I really appreciate that. There's no like trying to figure out where and what happened to everyone. It's just the story continues. And the way they shot this is really, really cool because the season finale ends with June and Serena reuniting, finding each other at the back of the train. And the shot ends like panning out with them in the window and the train is moving on. And now it's like a couple hours have passed and we're catching up with the train. So that the shot comes kind of like bird's eye view and sweeps and the train's moving through and it zooms in into the back of the train, and it's almost like the way it was shot was just really cool of like we're gonna just jump back into their story. And you've got June holding Noah, but her mind is going straight to Hannah. It's just flashbacks of Hannah as a newborn and their little hands and her little feet, and we're reminded instantly that she's still reeling with having to be further and more ineffectual to getting to Hannah, as she's on this train heading west. And then you get Noah crying, and it kind of brings her back into that present moment. And she starts interacting with Nicole, and it's like she's trying to stay in this moment with this child that she was able to save, but her mind is going to keep going back to Hannah. And then we get the first lines of this episode. You see June looking over her shoulder as Serena's approaching, and she says, "Here comes mommy. Mommy's always come back." And that line hit me so hard on the rewatch. I was like, oh my God, they tell you right from the opening line well, how this episode's going to end. But obviously, contextually speaking, like, it just makes sense. Serena's coming. She's talking to Noah. You don't really think anything of it, but on the rewatch, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And they continue to do that through this episode. Like, there's just certain lines where it's like really poignant generalizations of how important moms are and how much children need their mothers. And then when you by the time you get that reunion at the end and you see that it's June's mom, you've already your brain has already had all these little breadcrumbs reminding you like, yep, moms come back, moms are important, moms are what you need. And then you can it just hits you. It gives you that emotional impact in such an incredible way. They do it through this episode and it starts right with this first line. It's really, really cool. You get one final shot in the scene once June gives Noah back to Serena, and you can just see that she's in pain and she's exhausted and she's alone. Then they move to the back of the seats and they start having this conversation. Serena really thinks that she found this friend to commiserate with on this journey and that she's safe. And it's interesting because we know where this is going to go. So it's kind of cool to see the first conversation that Serena has. She really does like kind of ease into this, like, oh, I've made it. I've reached my destination. I'm safe. I can just sit back. I've got this friend with me that knows me. I've got someone that can help me hold my baby while I go to the bathroom. And we know that by the end of this episode, she's literally going to be like pushed off the train. And it reminds me of that line that we get in the book and in the show. In a gradually heated bathtub, you'll be boiled alive before you know it. And this train is like a gradually heating bathtub for Serena, and she doesn't realize it at first. And by the time she actually doesn't realize it until way too late, like the water's boiling and she's got to flee. But right here in the scene, she's really happy and thinking that she can finally get some rest. But she really reminds me of Naomi in like season 1 and 2 when Serena wanted nothing more than to have a baby, and every time they're together, Naomi's complaining about her baby and just about like the typical motherhood things. And Serena was always so offended by that. And this scene read so much like Naomi and Serena to me because she's just oblivious to what she's complaining about. She says like, I haven't been able to put him down. I feel like I've been holding him for days. And it's like, okay, she's got a broken arm and her baby's in Gilead. So what you're complaining about really sounds like lovely problems to have for her. Yeah, it was interesting to see Serena's like inability to see June's plight, but it was also like really hammering home that she just feels so safe right here. She feels like she has reached her destination and now she's free and she's free of the whalers, and like she's gonna say it. She's gonna continue to say this through this episode. But she really is unaware of how precarious her situation is at this point because the water is only just starting to get heated. And I love June's line of "I'm fucking exhausted and my arm is fucking killing me," because for so many seasons we've seen her have to like stifle and choose her language very carefully, and this is the first time that we just see her throw in the word fuck around kind of casually. Like she's sworn at Serena before and she's said fuck to Serena plenty of times, but it's usually out of like vitriol, and this was just like, I can say it because I can, and this is the language I'm choosing to use, and I'm going to use it, and there's nothing you can do about it, Serena, and I'm sorry if it offends you, but fuck you. And as someone who likes the word fuck a lot, that was just fun for me to watch. And we're going to see shortly like the language nuance here of like, June can say fuck and that's not an issue, but praise be will get you killed. So Serena like kind of reads the temperature in the room a little bit and goes, oh, it's getting a little warmer in here. Let me try to cool it down. She realizes she's irritating June and she kind of tries to dial it back a little bit. And Serena's not great at this, and she does better in this episode than like we've seen in the past until she doesn't at the end, and she just like fucking loses her mind, and it's crazy. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So in this point, like she sees it. She realizes that she's like kind of being a pain in the ass, and she dials it back, and she says, ask June, hey, what's going on with you? What happened to your arm? You must be in a lot of pain. Maybe I should stop complaining about the fact that I have to hold my baby. And so June said, June tells her what happened, and she tells her that she got run over by a truck in front of her house. And but we get a timeline reminder because, like I said, it's been a long time since we watched the show, and but this show is picking up right where it left off, essentially. So she says I got hit by a truck yesterday morning, so it's only been 24 hours since she was run over. Barely had any sleep since then, and she's has a broken arm which has been operated on. So that's the state of June right now, and we saw that in that last shot when she was getting up off the ground. Like she's obviously in pain, and if you think about how little sleep she's gotten, she's exhausted. So she lays it out for Serena, and then she reminds all of the viewers that this happened yesterday. And I love the way she says to Serena, always look both ways. Like the look on her face and the delivery was just perfect. And Serena doesn't know what to do with it. It's excellent. It's just so beautiful. She really like is taken aback for a moment of like, I don't know what to say to someone who just gave me all of that information. Like, and so but she again, Serena like chooses her words really carefully when she wants to. She has control over her language um throughout this episode, and when she realizes she misstepped, she kind of walks it back really gracefully every single time. And so she says to June, "You're one exceptionally tough woman." And that's just such a cool line because we've seen her say that to June so many ways and so many different like context, and every season she just says different things about, it's like terribly hard, the things that we do, and you're supposed to be one of the tough ones, and you're one of the strong ones, and blah blah blah. And like we've seen Serena use it certainly in like an antagonizing way, usually when June's not being tough and she wants to throw it in her face of like, why aren't you letting me rape you and take your baby happily? She's, you're stronger than that. So it was nice to see it delivered in such a genuine context, and June accepts it. It's like a tiny little peace treaty, or like tiny little acknowledgement of like just exactly how tough June is. Because if anybody knows how tough June is, it's Serena. So it's nice to hear that from Serena, and you can see that even it was nice even for June. And I think it's what spurs June on in the next moment to confide just a little bit further in Serena. And she turns to her and she kind of leans in closer and she's like, "It was Gilead." And Serena is like so over the moon to have something in common with her. Like her delivery of the line afterwards when she goes, "It seems they are unhappy with both of us." And it's that laugh at the end. It's the look on her face. It was just so great because she's so happy to like have somebody to commiserate with. That's all she was looking for in the beginning. And June is so quick to be like, we are not the same. And I mean, I've said on this podcast several times that I think they are very much the same. They're very similar. I just think they're like two sides of the same coin. They have a lot of similar traits in persistency, and putting them in the same room together can get these like really combative and explosive scenes. So I don't know, there is similarities to June, but I do agree with her in the sense like, no, Serena, this is not the same. Gilead doesn't isn't going after June the same way that they're going after you. She's been fleeing Gilead and all of its institutions and ideals since the moment Serena put them into place. So no, Serena, for fuck's sake, it's not the same thing. She's going to find out exactly why they're not the same by the end of this episode. And then Serena responds with, "Well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend." And June goes, "On a case by case basis." Yvonne Strahovski is so great in this. She's just so great, period. But she's excellent in this scene. I just love the way she can make her face like really get so romantic like that. And it fits June's next line perfectly. June kind of accepts that placation of you can leave everything behind you. And June's like, yeah, I just want to sleep right now. Like if this ends this conversation, then great. And she says, from your mouth to God's ears. And Serena says, well, God's been smiling on us so far. While we've been on the run, and her face just gets so hard eyes when she says it, and June calls her out on it instantly, and it's like, why do you make it sound so romantic? Like she just wants to go to sleep and she just can't let that statement stand. And so she asks her, why do you make that sound so romantic? And Serena responds with, well, that's unintentional. I don't find that there's nothing romantic about being absolutely terrified all the time. And it's like she still doesn't quite get that like June has been absolutely terrified. And all of these women and people on this train have also been absolutely terrified for a really, really long time. So then Serena says, tomorrow, Toronto and the Wheelers will be 1,000 miles away, and Gilead will be 1,000 miles away too. Tomorrow we can start to forget. June looks out the window as she gets further and further from Hannah. We know that Hannah has already begun to forget her, and she's fighting not to forget Hannah. I love the way they film the scene within this train car. No matter the shot, you can see movement, right? So like the train just feels like this constant moving. It kind of keeps the pace going because you just feel the train's momentum. And June is seated backwards. So as Serena's saying, like you can begin to forget, and she's looking out the window, you're feeling the landscape like pulling away from the screen, right? Pulling away from the shot and pulling away from June. And so it just kind of adds to that emotional weight of we know that she's getting pulled away from everything that she loves and everything that she wants to be near, and she has to flee, and she's fleeing for her life. And so now she's moving away from it, and she doesn't want to forget. She's looking back and she's about to dream of Hannah. Like she doesn't want to forget it. That's I think one of the things that makes the emotional impact so much more intense at the end, because you're getting that pull back towards Gilead and back towards Toronto, towards Luke and towards Hannah and towards Nick and towards everyone that June loves, as she's being pulled further and further, and she's going to end up in Alaska. And so when she finds her mother there, it's just the last thing that you expect, and it feels so good. It's just one of the reasons why it hits you so incredibly hard by the end. And it's the physical movement of the train, that visualization of June getting pulled further and further from everything that she loves, really makes the ending just that much more impactful. And at the same time, you've got Serena, and she's seated facing out the window. She's facing backwards. And so as she's talking about forgetting, and there's nothing, she wants to forget everything in her past. And she's going to find out by the end of the episode, as much as she wants to forget and leave everything behind, she has to face it. And so she's facing it in the scene. And it's really cool because she is going to have to face her past. She does not get to forget as she moves forward. So I just love the way they shot the scene. It was really cool. So then June looks out the window and you got the bear, Nicole's bear, sitting on the windowsill as she starts to fall asleep. But it reminded me of when she was on the run with Hannah in the first episode of the first season. We get that flashback of June, Luke, and Hannah trying to escape, and that she's going to talk about this scene later about how she was a half a mile from the border. But Hannah has a bunny with her, and eventually it gets left behind in the woods, and Luke finds it. That bear against the landscape of the forest really kind of triggers her brain into the dream that she's about to have. And you get more of like what I was saying before in that last scene of the way the landscape is racing by. It makes you feel, you really get June's mentality of like trying to hold on to Hannah as she's being pulled away from her once again. Also, the way that it's shot, so then we get, so you see June's eyes close, and then we enter into her dream. And the way it's shot is so perfect because it just really feels like a dream. It's hazy. Hannah's face isn't ever clear. You see bits and pieces of her, but it really just does feel exactly like a dream. And the landscape looks exactly like if June had just like jumped off the train and found Hannah. She's wearing the same clothes that she's wearing in real life. And also, just like a dream, you get a break from the momentum. So far on this episode, we've been moving. You get that feeling of momentum throughout, and this is the first time that you get that break from the momentum. It's just June remembering Hannah. Also, we just got a flashback of Hannah's tiny hands, and this is the first thing that we see in the dream, and it's just highlighting that she's grown so much. And we see that June's memories of Hannah are often focused on her hands. And interestingly, there's one shot of a flashback of Holly where they also focus on her hands. As she's driving with June, they're singing to Gwen Stefani, and she's got her hand out the window. And there's this one shot where it's just her hand against the sky. So it feels very similar to this shot. So it's kind of cool that you got Hannah and then you got Holly. You got these flashbacks that feel very, very similar. But this isn't a flashback. This is a dream. And that's kind of really sad and poignant for June because so far in the series, we've only really seen, I think unless I'm forgetting something, we've only seen June have memories of Hannah. And this is the first time that she can no longer go off of her memories as much as like piecing together the glimpses of her that she's gotten and imagining them together. Like she doesn't have any more memories to go off of. This is just a dream. Oh, and then I went on a little bit of a testament breadcrumb rabbit hole. This one's really, really kind of a stretch, but I didn't know what those flowers are. I don't know what those flowers are. They look like purple daisies to me, and we know that Daisy is in the Testaments. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, it's Agnes and Daisy together with June. It's like this dream of this reunion that will eventually happen. So probably a stretch because that entire thing hinges on those being purple daisies, and I'm pretty sure purple daisies aren't a thing, but it looks like purple daisies, kind of. Yeah. So you go from this really beautiful shot of this dream back to reality as June wakes up, and you transition nicely as you see like just the window and she's kind of like acclimating. The landscape's kind of going by and you can see her like just kind of processing, and you have one of those really nice dreams where this child that's always been out of her reach was just so close to her, and it's that moment, and it's like heartbreaking. It's hard enough to wake up from that dream and then to realize that the one child that she does have is now missing is like panic inducing in such an intense way. And Panic is shot so well in the scene. It's really, really cool. The music starts to intensify and the camera starts to jostle as June moves through the crowd. And there is a lot more people. They talk about it later. But all of a sudden, it's very crowded. There's a lot of people and she can barely move and she's calling. You can really feel the panic as she's moving through the car. And then you get to when she does find Serena, everything starts to calm. Once June like takes Nicole back and she puts her in the stroller, you can tell that she's still like that adrenaline is still coursing through her because she still has that anger of like, how dare you take my child? And Serena's like, she woke up and you were still sleeping, so I took her. And she's like, don't ever do that again. And I love Serena's line. She goes, I was concerned you might be ill-tempered if you didn't get enough rest. Silly me. And I'm gonna give Serena this one. I fully understand June's panic in that situation, but I think Serena meant well. I don't know if there's a win-win in that situation, maybe just to not move so fucking far away. But June did need rest. She needed rest and like she needed, and it's hard to rest if you hear your baby waking up. So like as soon as she hears Nicole, she's gonna wake up too. So I kind of appreciate that Serena let her get some rest and took Nicole out of earshot so that June could still sleep. But June doubles down on the fact that she doesn't want Serena to put her hands on this child. She says, just keep your fucking hands off my child. Do you understand me? And oh, that iconic line. I love it. And I love that it trips Serena up for a moment. And she's like, okay, yes, I understand you. What do you think I'm going to do? Steal your daughter while you're sleeping like some kind of Disney villain? For God's sake, June, that's completely idiotic. I love that line so much because we all know that Serena sees herself as a Gilead princess, not the villain. Come on, June. I enjoyed the humor in that line. Serena can tell that June is not looking well despite getting some sleep, and June is really not interested in Serena's help at all. At one point, when she goes to feel her forehead and June swats her away, like, there's been so many times in the show that Serena's touch has been unwanted, and it's so nice that she can just whack her. Get away from me. I really, really liked the physical interactions that they were having. Oh, and then we get that great warning of Serena goes and hands June some, they're talking about like food and not having enough food, and Serena goes and hands June some apple juice, and she goes, well, they did hand these out, praise be. And June like reacts instantly and is like, do not, and she whispers to her, don't say that here. And it's the first time that Serena realized that those words amongst this group of people is going to be really incendiary. And then we get a little bit of like a timeline and location update of they passed through Winnipeg 6 hours ago, and they added a lot more trains and a lot more cars and a lot more people, and you can see that it's feeling a lot more crowded. And so as this metaphorical temperature of this metaphorical bathtub is beginning to rise, you can feel the claustrophobia setting into of this like train setting. And that's going to affect the way June's going to try to escape Serena and leave her behind. And she physically can't get through with the stroller, which is such a relatable thing. Like, God, strollers are so annoying in crowds. Like, they become unmanageable. Like, there was one time I actually had to abandon my stroller because it was impossible to move through this crowd that I was now stuck in with the stroller. It was awful. So I get it. I've been there and it sucks. And if you're doing it alone with a broken arm, with the stakes amped up as much as June has them amped up, yeah, this is a terrible situation. It's awful trying to move a stroller through a crowd. She sits down and Serena catches up with her and she's asking her if she's okay. And she says, you have to agree. It makes sense for us to stick together. And I'm kind of with Serena at this point, like, June, I get it. It's Serena, but like you can't move. You have a broken arm. You need some help. You need somebody to help you. If you're not gonna have Serena help you, go find another friend. But she says, Serena, we are not together, okay? Once June sits down, Serena is following her. She sees that she's not well. June looks like she's about to pass out, and Serena goes to feel her hand again. She goes, don't touch me. Keep your hands off me. And she slaps at her hand again, and it made me laugh again. At least in this situation, Serena accepts that June doesn't want her help, but she leaves her alone and goes and finds a doctor because she does need a doctor. No good deed goes unpunished, Serena. Another thing that was really cool is this is really reminiscent of when Serena goes to get the doctor in the bottle episode in the hospital when June is sitting at that like prayer vigil for Natalie for X amount of days and she's losing her mind. And that's one of the times when Serena says, I thought you were one of the tough ones. And but she can tell that she's struggling and she's got the scalpel and she ends up trying to cut Serena. I think she might, like, she cuts her clothes. She swipes at Serena with a scalpel. And then when Serena takes it from her, June cuts her hand in the process. And so but instead of turning her in, Serena goes and gets a doctor who comes and helps her. And it's Dr. Yates. And they have that conversation about Holly. So it's a bottle episode, very much like this one. It's also a Holly episode. We get a lot of Holly information in there. Um, and it's just kind of like giving you those little subtle mental cues like, hey, remember her mom is a doctor because you're going to see her in her scrubs before you see her face twice. And I missed the first one at the end, but we'll get there. So it's just like these little subtle reminders through this episode of Holly and Serena June in this situation. Also, the doctor that shows up, he starts he's got like the typical doctor bedside manner, I suppose, but he's asking her for her consent before he goes into care for her. And she's uninterested. She doesn't want help. She wants to talk to Luke. And so he starts bargaining with her. So he says, if you can just let me check you out, I'll let you use my phone. You can call whoever you'd like. And it's just, he had a very similar persona to Dr. Yates. So I just feel like that had to be like kind of like giving this little callback to our brain for the end of this episode. So then the doctor says to June, maybe your friend can take your daughter for a moment. And June's quickly like, no. But I thought it was kind of funny that he definitely didn't recognize Serena at this point. It wasn't like instantaneous. I think it is in this scene though, because June says no, but then kind of like realizes she doesn't really have any options and she's gonna need Serena's help at least for the rest of this journey, and then she can ditch her when she gets off this train. But in this moment, she just needs her to hold Nicole so that she can have her arm examined. And she says, fine, maybe you can go find her a diaper. And Serena goes, relax, June, I'm not going anywhere. And it's that, I don't know if it's her voice. I don't know what it is. If she says June and that triggers him, I'm not really sure what it is in that moment. But or maybe just the implication that she would have taken the baby. But he looks at her at that point. He does a double take, and he had to have recognized her at that point, and that had to have been the point where he at least realized that he'd seen her somewhere and he's trying to place it. So it turns out that June's got an infection, and it is good that she got to see a doctor. Now, Serena starts to take charge of this car and says, well, this is why mothers and children should be cared for. We are the most important people on the train. You should see Dr. Bryn next, she says to the pregnant woman. And then we leave the train for this one scene. Nick is arriving home from that little lockup situation that he was in. And how do we know that he's back from jail? He's still in handcuffs, which I was really laughing at first. They're really going to take the handcuffs off in front of his house. They didn't want to take the handcuffs off before they put him in the car. But I'm thinking that they just had to remind the viewers, like, hey, he was locked up. Now he's free. See, handcuffs now, no like handcuffs. But he finds out that High Commander Wharton is waiting for him, and that looks ominous. We see Rose first, and so she sees him pull up, and she just looks very unimpressed. And we get nothing else. She goes back into the house, and he's told that High Commander Wharton is waiting for him. And it looks like Nick has gotten an upgrade in his house. Um, Last time we saw his living situation, it was kind of like that little baby commander house, and now it looks like he's living in New Bethlehem. I couldn't tell from the shot here exactly if this is for sure New Bethlehem, but if you watched all 3 episodes, then you already know that this is New Bethlehem and that he's living here with Rose, and that his father-in-law is going to come stay with him. Is where we're getting to in the scene. But they do something really cool with the way that they shoot this scene, right? Okay, so stay with me here. At first, I thought it was a stretch. Now I think it's actually entirely intentional. So you leave Nick in that scene and you go to a shot of High Commander Wharton. And it's that shot that we see in the trailer of like him looking out over a balcony in the water, and he's from behind. And so he turns and he walks inside, and you watch him like walk inside. And I'm assuming this is Nick's house and Nick's still waiting outside for him. But yeah, that's got to be what's happening. So he walks inside and he's just like, it's kind of a long shot. And I'm like, what? Why are they filming him like approaching Nick like this? And he does seem like he's gaining momentum. He looks in the mirror, he puts his jacket on, and he like charges out the down the stairwell and out the door and like into this meeting with Nick where Nick's waiting for him. And he makes this like determined entrance towards Nick in such a way that makes it feel like he's the train that's about to run Nick over. And at first, when I was saying this, I was like, well, that's a stretch, but I think it fits. I'm gonna go with it. This is the train situation here, as Commander Wharton is the train, and he's gonna run right over Nick in this scene, and it kind of feels like that's the approach he's taking. But stay tuned, because at the end of the scene, I feel like that's exactly what happens. And we get the feeling from Nick in the way that he greets him, like his voice just sounds really tense as he says, like, good morning, sir. What a nice surprise. And we don't see Nick rattled too much. He generally seems like pretty in control of his voice. And this one just sounded tense. Like if there was any reason to wonder whether or not this was a good situation, it doesn't feel like it from Nick's response. He launches into the whole like making up with Larry thing, and he'll smooth it over with him as he goes like golf on the back nine or whatever. But he says something really interesting, and like I feel like there's only one way to take this. He says, "Who amongst us hasn't been tempted? But don't you think it's time to put away those childish things? No matter how fun and diverting they may be, prioritize what's best for you and your family." And he's got to be talking about June, right? Like he must know that that's June, and specifically June. Like he gets Nick punches Larry in the face. His statement right after he punches him is, you could have had her killed. And he's saying, Commander, that wasn't me. And so they're talking about she. It's got to be June. He must know it's June, and he must know that Nick has this diversion and this like fun little plaything, but now he's got to put her away. It was just interesting. I at first I was like, I don't know what he knows, and then I'm like, I feel like that has to be June. So let me know if you read that differently. I was kind of perplexed by that, but I feel like that's the implication here, is that he knows damn well that this is June. And Rose knows about June too, so Makes me feel a little bit like Jesus, Nick. So he says that he's going to be sticking around, so and prioritizing his family in the same way, and then he leaves and Nick responds with fuck. And it's like, just of course, the second he finally agrees to spy for the Americans and his father-in-law is going to move in, then the scene ends and we go back to the train. So the way that they transition the ending of the scene, the last shot is Nick by himself on the screen. And the next shot is of this train barreling towards exactly where Nick just was on that screen and goes right over him, right in front of the camera. It's just this really cool shot. And I was like, really thinking that this commander train entrance in the beginning of the scene was just a stretch for me to find a way to tie train into the scene. But then the way that they transitioned out, I'm like, oh, that had to be intentional. Commander Wharton is absolutely the train that's running Nick over here. And now we're going to go back to the train. So back on the train, you got June finishing up with the doctor, and she's making her way towards Serena, who's clearing out a space in the train for just women and children. And she starts asking June about if she was able to talk to Luke. And she goes, no, I talked to Moira. And she goes, well, is everything okay? She goes, is there any news? What's going on with your husband? And June's very short with her at this point. She's like, he's been arrested, okay? And it kind of stops Serena in her tracks, no pun intended. But we know that Serena and Luke have a lot of history together. June follows that up with, that he was arrested for defending her. And that really jumped out at me because we've seen what happened when Serena got shot with the people protesting, and it got intense then, right? We're going to see something that I think is kind of a callback to that later in the scene when it gets intense on this train. And Serena kind of reverts into this like tone of voice that it was very reminiscent of her book tour when she got shot. So she goes and gets shot, and then she says to Fred, like, be a man and go get justice for me, go get God's justice, because I don't have faith in the police to like get justice for me, or whatever she says. Fred goes and kills the guy's wife right in front of him and then kills him, and never saw any legal repercussions for that. And so to see that Luke was just defending June in the moment of trying to stop this guy from murdering his wife, and now he's in jail for it. It was really interesting to watch all of this play out in Serena's face, because there was a lot happening in that moment. Like, we as the viewers, we already knew that Luke was in jail, so watching it have such an impact on Serena was really interesting. And also because a lot of the most recent interactions with Serena and Luke were Luke saying that he's always going to defend his wife. Everything that Serena's seen from Luke has been Luke defending June. When she was in Canada and he showed up at the protest with the sign and he confronted Waterford, she saw it then. She has the meeting with him where she is trying to meet up with Nicole, and it gets really contentious for a moment because he wants to know if June is okay. And she's like, she's fine. Let me see the baby. And he's like, she's not fine. Like, stop lying to me. I know she's not fine. And then ever since they've been in Canada together, they had the scenes where he showed up and was like, I'm going to let my wife kill you. Like, Serena knows that Luke is going to defend June. And to find out that because of that, he's now in jail and they're separated, there's a lot playing on Serena's mind in that moment. And Serena really like gathers herself after a moment and she says, God's justice will prevail. Luke will find you in Vancouver. Gilead won't matter and your family will be together again. And she's trying so hard to say the right thing, but she misses the mark so aggressively. And June just looks at her and she goes, Serena, Hannah, Hannah, she's still there. She was kidnapped and she's still a prisoner. And Serena goes, you're right. I'm sorry. I misspoke. Please forgive me. And as like genuine as that apology is, and she realizes like how vastly she misstepped, Serena, for fuck's sake, like it would be so much easier to understand if you hadn't used Hannah as a pawn to antagonize June for 5 seasons. Like, we just saw her use Hannah at the funeral. Like, that wasn't that long ago. Serena, you know that Hannah is still in Gilead. Like, come on, come on. And you can see the frustration in June's face. Like, how can you be so blind? She's gonna say it later, but I feel it more here. Like, how can you be so blind, Serena? June finds out from Moira that the train isn't going to be stopping in Vancouver because they're overwhelmed. So Serena says, where are we going then? And June's like, I don't know, but I know my husband won't be there. And I couldn't help but think like, yeah, well, Serena's husband won't be there either, June. So you have that in common. But Serena does not take that opportunity to remind June of that fact. Instead, she says something incredibly nice. And it's the thing, like, Serena is so good with her words when she wants to be. And this was this moment where you're like, oh my gosh, like, yes, Serena, you're right. So she says, by his hand, he will find a way to bring your family back together. June, that is your gift. If it is at all possible, you will find a way. And I love how she starts by saying, like, God will find your way by his hand. He will find a way to bring your family back. But then she's like, June, that's your gift. Like, God gave you this gift that you always get your family back together. And I do think that that underlying God gave you this gift is there. But the fact that she was like, no, June, this is what you do. If there is a way, you're going to find it. And like, damn, Serena knows that. She's relentless. Like, and I think that the two of them can be that's one of the similarities that I see in them is that they're both relentless. To have Serena be the one to remind June of this fact was really great. Then June responds with, I don't know if I can be alone again. And Serena says, then we will find a way. I will help. And June looks at her and she goes, I don't want your help. And Serena says, I know you don't want my help. I realize that. And you don't have to accept it. And I understand that too. But God would want me to help. I need to, after everything. And her staccato delivery here was so perfect. They have hashed this out all through season 4 and 5 and all through this episode. June wants nothing more than to get away from her, and despite it all, here they are trapped on a train. But I do think that last season, June telling Serena that she was a better Christian than her really hit home for Serena. I think she really just wants to prove June wrong at this point. Like, she is going to be the better Christian. She knows she fucked this up, and she is going to make it right. What she doesn't quite see yet is that she's fucked up on a grander sense and she needs to make it right on a grander sense. But in this moment, I do think she's genuinely trying to make it work for her own redemption and for her own path back to God. She knows this is what she needs, whether June wants to accept it or not. The last shot of the scene is really, really cool. You've got this final image that kind of pans out. You've got them side by side moving in the same direction, and Serena finally making amends, telling her that she's going to help her to get Hannah back. Great. But you've also got this one image of exactly what she's making amends for. And it's this broken and bruised June beside Serena, strapped with a baby that was supposed to make it all worth it. In a sense, that's kind of what they get. Like, you're going to see in in episode 3, that they're touting to the foreign diplomats this new Gilead way of life of like, look, we have got this rising birth rate. We've also got this clean water and clean food. And what they don't say is that it goes at this brutal and unseen cost. And that's the other side of it, which is June. So again, they're two sides of the same coin in some sense. It was a really interesting final image to see Serena and this baby beside June broken. Then we cut to Moira and she's walking very determinedly. And I'm like, oh, where is she going? And then she gets to a certain spot and she just stops and she walks back and she's just pacing outside of Tuello's office. And as soon as the door opens, she barges in. She's like, sorry, I couldn't make an appointment. I got news. And she's telling him about the surveillance. He looks as excited to see her as Nick was to see Wharton. And she's dumping all of this information on him. And he gives her this like platitude and she calls him out on it. She says, that's what I say to people every day. That means nothing. But then he tells her they're getting ready to shut this place down. This entire office could be gone in a year. The cabinet wants to start normalizing relations with Gilead. That would mean de-recognizing the United States. And he's telling her this because he's, explaining that it's not a good time to be an American in Canada. And she's kind of like, yeah, I know that. He's giving her this further information. And I love the way they filmed this entire scene because the lighting in it feels like one of those pre-Gilead shots, like the flashbacks that we get as the United States is leading up to Gilead. And there's like all these like monumental markers in June's memories of the slow shift and the transition from United States to Gilead. And throughout those, the lighting is always really like, I don't know what the word would be, but it kind of just feels like sepia tone. There's like this golden haze. When you're watching it through the series, it kind of like differentiates current day Gilead versus pre-Gilead America. And this is a current day shot, but it feels like it could be added to the next in the timeline of the end of the United States because it is marking the end of the United States as a recognized foreign player. And they're going to start recognizing Gilead and they can't recognize Gilead and the United States. It was really cool the way they have this continuation of the lighting through this series. In the future, this could absolutely fall in line as a flashback to the end of the United States. And then Moira wants to know if that's it, if they're just done fighting, if this is the end of the road. And Tuello confides in her that there's Mayday, that Mayday's still fighting back, and that now he's acknowledging Mayday as this thing. So it sounds like he's always kind of been unofficially working with Mayday, but now he has no other avenues but to officially be working with Mayday because there isn't anyone else to be working with. So he says that Mayday's fighting back, and she says, I thought you didn't work with Mayday. And he says, we don't have many friends left, so you find your allies where you can. She says, I want to help, I need to help. And we are seeing Moira jumping back into the fold here. We see a lot with Moira through season 4 and 5, especially, of her kind of feeling like she's taking a sidelined approach to other people in her life, like June and her girlfriend Una, who was doing. Remember, she like insists on coming, and that's how she gets June out. And then she finds out like June has done all these other things, and every time she's with June, it's like, June, you've done these amazing things, and Moira's always kind of been like that counterbalance to June. And at this point, I feel like she's also been pushed to her limits, and she's just ready to enter the fold. And she says, and she's telling Tuello, like, I have things to offer. I know stuff too. I was surprised that he didn't know her history and how she got out and what she had seen up until this point. But she tells him, like, I was in Jezebel's, and he's like, no one gets out of Jezebel's. She's like, I killed a commander, and I know black market stuff. I could be useful. And she doesn't say it exactly in those words, but she's implying like she could be useful. And I love that implication on the show. We've had a whole episode of women being useful on the show, so I like it every time they say they can be useful. We'll see it in episode 2 with Holly. She says doctors can be useful, and that's how she survived. I think Moira just really wants to be seen as useful as well. And I think that's the thing. She hasn't been able to be seen as useful and to feel useful, and every avenue that she's gone through has failed, and she's hit dead end after dead end, and she's as frustrated and spinning her wheels as Luke is. And we're going to see in the next episode, like, they're both just ready to do anything and everything. They want to help, they need to help, and that's what it is. And so there we have it. Moira is jumping back on the train as far as getting back in this fight. And that might be the big stretch I have as far as train. What was really cool about the next train shot is that it's an aerial shot of the train moving through a bunch of trees. They're really, really thick. And all I could think of was wilderness. What's going to happen is basically the scene is going to devolve into a persecution of Serena. And the shot of the train going through the wilderness is the perfect imagery as we're about to be reminded of the wilderness episode where Fred is salvaged. And when we cut into the train, it's a scene that feels very much like season 4, with the like handmaid support group, and it's those handmaids that are going to salvage Fred, and it feels exactly the same thing. Like, we know by the end of the scene, like, these women are going to turn on Serena, and this is the space where she's like, oh, it's women and children need their own space, and now within their own space they're sharing their own stories. And so that first thought was like, it does feel like season 4 leading up into the wilderness where Fred is salvaged, and we know exactly where the scene is going to go. So it was a really great way to jump back into this train scene and to kick off the rest of this episode. We have a line where when one of the women is saying that she survived an agricultural colony because a nice doctor gave a shit. It's such an interesting line. It's kind of doing two things. It's a little bit of foreshadowing about the nice doctor that's about to turn Serena in for the war crimes, and kind of set into motion everything that's about to happen in the scene. As well as, like, throughout this episode, this doctor is kind of this present thing. There's just a lot of doctor talk, and this nice doctor little nod of a breadcrumb is kind of just priming our brains for Holly at the end of this episode. Another thing the scene kind of reminded me of is the way in which they were telling their stories kind of sounded like the way that the women were telling their stories in the letters through season 1 and season 2 that June was moving through Mayday and eventually used in Canada to derail Serena's Canadian diplomatic, or Fred's Canadian diplomatic pursuits at that point. And now you have all these like living letters on this train out of Canada telling their stories, and it's really ineffectual. Like, they're fleeing. Canada wants them out. They're talking with Gilead. So, in terms of the climate now with Gilead and political and foreign relations, that's really disconcerting. One of the women says they're not gone. If they were gone, it would be easier. And June is really quick to say, no, no, that's not true. And that's the thing that we know for sure about June, is that this hope of reuniting with her daughter, it has kept her going. And she's lost so many people that she knows that her being gone would not be easier than a chance to set her free and to reunite with her at some point. We just know what a catalyst hope is for June throughout the series. So it's nice to see her kind of clinging to that and trying to reiterate that amongst these other women. So as Serena's listening to all of these women's stories, she says, I'm so sorry. It seems like all of us at one point or another were a part of some kind of violence. And it's such carefully chosen words For Serena, like she still has a lot of control over what she's saying at this point, and she's choosing her words very carefully. She does stumble and look at June, knowing she understands the nuance of what Serena is saying. Like she could have said, "We've all experienced violence," and technically that would have been true. I mean, she's missing a finger. Like June has seen her experience violence. Like that technically would be true. But what she said, it seems all of us have been a part of some kind of violence, was more accurate. And so I thought that was really interesting that that's the way she chose to say that. In some ways, she was really self aware. What she's not getting at this point is that because of the violence that these women have been a part of and have experienced, they are also capable of. And I don't think she realizes the violence that this group is capable of. But June kind of looks like she accepts Serena's statement for what it is. And she starts to tell the group, but kind of like looking directly at Serena. It feels like she's really just telling Serena a part of her story that Serena hasn't been privy to. Serena knows so much of June's story, but I don't think she's ever actually heard this part of it. And so June's telling her about how Hannah was taken from her in the woods and how she was so scared. She says, Hannah was so scared and I was terrified. And earlier we heard Serena talking about being absolutely terrified while on the run with Noah, and it had only been a few days. And this is like a really good reminder for Serena that June has been absolutely terrified for years. We get a little bit more information of how close she was. She said they were half a mile from the border. So she ran for a mile and a half because in that first episode, in that flashback, when she separates from Luke and runs into the woods, he says it's the border is 2 miles. So if she was within a half a mile, then she was running for a mile and a half, which with a child Hannah's size, that is really far to be running. And she says, I couldn't run fast enough. And Serena says they were soldiers. And she says, and I'm her mom. They were soldiers. They were going to catch you. Of course, you couldn't run fast enough. It's unrealistic to think so. And June's response is, I'm her mom. And that's explanation enough. And the look she gives Serena is like, like you're a mom. Look at you holding Noah. Gonna get your kid out of the situation, period. You're the mom. Her look says so much too, because there's just such a resolute look of guilt on her face. And it's like Serena knows there's nothing that she can say to June that's going to absolve her of that, even if it's not realistic. Serena continues and says, May God heal you. I'm so sorry. And June replies with, I wish that helped. And I feel like that's just kind of the biggest acknowledgement of wrongdoing and of trauma and needing to be healed. And also June acknowledging that it's just not enough. It doesn't change or speed up the healing that needs to be done. So then the doctor shows up to warn June of the situation. He kind of pulls her away and he tells her that, how well do you know her? And she's like, kind of well enough. And she's a refugee like everyone else. And he's like, no, if you knew who she was, you wouldn't let her anywhere near your child. And I'm like, weren't you the one who told her to take the child like earlier? That's when I realized that he didn't realize who she was until halfway through that scene. When June finds out what's happening and that Serena's going to be arrested, she says, promise me that we will keep her baby safe, all right? And he says nothing, which is really ominous. He just kind of looks at her and then goes and takes the baby from Serena and he starts to question her. So he takes Noah from Serena and he starts looking him over and he says, well, he seems like a very healthy young boy. Praise be for that. And Serena knows at this point. Alarm bells start going off for her. June has already warned her not to use that language, and here he is using it. And it starts to feel ominous, and you can see her start to get uncomfortable. Like she reads the room at this point. You can see her start to get uncomfortable. It's like the bathtub is starting to get a little warmer than she'd like. He asks about Noah's father, and Serena says that he died in the war. And she kind of stammers as she says it, and she looks back over her shoulder at June, which is a little funny. And again, a reminder of the wilderness. Serena, what happened to Noah's father? Like, pay attention. The people in this car are capable of ripping you apart the same way June ripped Fred apart. Tread carefully, and she is not going to tread carefully for much longer. Like, I really wish she would feel the foreshadowing that's happening here with Fred, and she just doesn't. Then the doctor starts to explain that he worked in fertility labs and rarely the wives would come in, and when they did, they'd ask the most intelligent questions, and she's starting to realize where this is going. She purses her lips a little bit and she asks for Noah back, and June immediately echoes her and says, doctor, I think he misses his mommy. We get another nod to mommy and missing their mommy. June echoes her and he kind of pauses for a second, and it makes me look very uncomfortable that he's not giving this baby back. But he does pass off the baby and it gets back to Serena. And as she's buckling him in, he says he really is a beautiful boy, Mrs. Waterford. And you just hear the music in the background screeches, and it's like a mic drop moment. The temperature rises really rapidly at this point. in this car. People start reacting. You start hearing different voices of dissent and shock, and they start circling in it. The way it's shot, you start to feel very claustrophobic. There's like very, very like lightly in the background, but insistent warning, like sirens going off that just kind of gives you the sense of urgency. The group wants to know how she got on this train, and she's like, "I left Gilead because I wanted freedom for my son, just like you." And she's trying to appeal to them, but it is not working. I love the line of the girl. This line has stayed with me ever since I've seen this episode. I love this line so much. She says, "Who cares? You built the fucking place. It belongs to you. You're the rat that doesn't get to jump off the ship. You're the rat that sinks." And then June tries to diffuse the situation. Everyone calm down, but the crowd isn't moved. June is feeling more powerless than we are used to seeing June be in this moment. She's exhausted, she's broken, and she's fighting an uphill battle. I mean, I don't think there was any diffusing this crowd to begin with. I think that's the point, is there's so much violence they've experienced, and right now they have a place in which they can direct it, and a very valid place. So they're going to direct it towards her, and they will move June out of the way. But June lets them know that the police are coming for her, and the doctor jumps in and explains that he reported her. And Serena pleads with him to not turn her in. And when that doesn't work, she turns to June and she tries to plead to her. And then June says, "How can you be so blind sometimes?" And someone else responds, "Well, she isn't blind, but she should be. We can cut out her tongue." And they're all closing in on her. Their faces are getting closer and closer. And June says, "Enough." She spoke out. "They took her finger. She has paid." And and then someone else says she threw people off rooftops, gender traders. How do you pay for that? Cue Serena. The first time I watched this scene, my eyeballs almost popped out of my head. I could not believe that she just started spewing the words that came out of her mouth. Like, "Serena, read the room." My God, this has to be the worst case of Serena not reading the room that we have ever seen. Like, she is just so oblivious to how much vitriol and hatred and violence she is about to be on the receiving end of. But she also may be feeling all of that vulnerability in this moment, because she resorts to this speech pattern that we haven't seen a lot of. Um, she does it so well in this episode. My God, I've watched this scene so many times, and every single time I'm just blown away by the way she delivers these lines. But she sounds exactly like she did on the book tour, when the crowd turned against her then. So as this crowd is turning against her now, you see her just revert right back to these old patterns of speech, and my God, is it horrifying. So she says, "Before Gilead, America was full of whores." June jumps in there and says, "Serena, shut up." Yes, exactly that. But she continues, "Women were getting raped and killed every day, and that was your country. You were unfit. I'm not responsible for your tragedies. Your children weren't taken away from you. They weren't stolen. They were saved." "Serena, shut up," June says again. "God hated America because America turned their back on God, and God took your country away. God bless America." The way she says that line was so fucking good. Insane, but so good. Oh my God, I could watch that line and that delivery over and over again because she's unhinged. It's like you can see the faces. The camera cuts to all of these women and they're like zombie like as they close in around her, and she just doubles down on everything she's saying. She reverts back to that like preacher daughter book tour days where she's always been fueled by the dissent of the crowd, and this is what's fueling her now. And it's like, "Serena, read the room. They're about to eat you alive." Like, you have to know somewhere that they are going to be capable of this. But the cop arrives to diffuse the situation. The doctor says he will keep you safe now, safer than you deserve. And it kind of like Serena feels like, I don't know, because Serena doesn't want to be arrested here. And she doesn't realize getting arrested is like best case scenario for her like immediate survival. So as soon as the cop shows up, you think like it feels like this is gonna be the shift and he's gonna take her away, but instead he checks his papers and he's like, "Checks out, you're good. Sorry to bother you. Be on your way." And June knows what's happening here. June can figure it out. And the crowd is kind of upset. They want to see her arrested as well. So June jumps in there and says, "No, no, no. This is absolutely Serena Waterford. I would know. She was my mistress." And then the crowd is like horrified that June was even traveling with her. And they go, "She raped you." And June doubles down. And Serena's still pleading in June's ear, like, "No, please, June, stop." And she tells her, "Trust me, shut up." It's the third time she's had to tell Serena to shut up in the last 30 seconds. Like, she just doesn't know when to stop talking and trust the situation. For fuck's sake, Serena, how can you be so blind sometimes? So she still doesn't get it, and the doctor then starts. The police officer then starts to reiterate exactly what June had already picked up on. And he says, he had a wife that died in the colonies and his son would be 11. Serena's starting to pick up on his intentions. Both the doctor and June try to get the cop to take Serena, but he doesn't. And they start to usher anyone who doesn't want to be in the room out. And Serena finally gets what's about to happen. That gradually heating bathtub is getting very, very hot now. And the crowd starts to gather around them and surround them in this like slowly zombie like march. And it's very, very, very creepy. It's such a well shot scene. It feels so claustrophobic. June and Serena are back to back. They clasp hands, which is a really interesting shot because we see the hand clasp in so many poignant scenes, and it's such a thing of camaraderie. Like the handmaids clasp hands before they're about to get hung in the beginning of season 2, or they think they're about to get hung. We see it with June and Moira when they're in like the Red Center in the early days and they can't communicate, but they can reach out and touch each other's hand. We've seen it with the in all the flashbacks, June's always holding hands. So that was really interesting. There is kind of this shift in their relationship at this point, and like earlier when I was saying it feels like a little bit of a truce, now it does feel like they're together whether they want to be or not. As much as June is trying to rid herself of Serena, she doesn't want to be rid of her in this way. As they're coming in around her, Serena says, "Don't come any closer to my baby," and she's yelling for June, and June's like, "It's okay, back off, back off." Gets in someone's face and she said, this is not going to bring you peace. But then somebody pushes Serena from behind, and it's like they were all waiting for the signal. But somebody shoves Serena. It's kind of like somebody metaphorically threw the first stone. And the violence starts to escalate from there. She starts to get pushed around the circle, and she says, "Please, I have a baby." And June says, "Serena, give me the baby." And they're starting to push June out. And she's got the broken arm. There's not only so much she can do in this situation, and she's getting further and further from Serena, and she's trying at the last minute to at least get Noah out of the situation. And she says, "Serena, give me the baby." Um, but she won't give her the baby. And this really tripped me up because I'm like, Serena, like you can't use your baby as a human shield in this situation. But that was the last thing that June had just told her was like, I let her go. I let her go. And this was her biggest guilt, was letting her child go. She's her mom. She was supposed to protect her. And Serena is just not going to let this child go. But hanging on to that baby like that was not a good look. But it was survival. I get that, like, we talk a lot about how in the moment you just gotta survive, and obviously she's trying to survive, but my god, she almost sacrificed her kid in the process. Then you see Serena and she's kind of like crouched down, and she is at least protecting Noah in that moment and using herself as a shield between these hands that are starting to reach. Like the crowd is completely closing in on her. You don't even see faces anymore. You just see hands grabbing at her. And we know what that looked like with Fred, but they chased him down and chased him down, and then they caught him, and it was just like a pack of hands. We've seen it before. June is watching this from the sidelines, and she only has this one play, and this one play is this emergency break. Oh, and that was the cool thing about June, is we've seen this for 5 seasons as well, is in these moments of complete chaos when the stakes are incredibly high and there's so much adrenaline and emotion and just chaos happening, June really keeps her wherewithal and her awareness about her. So she sees that there's this emergency brake and she pulls it, and the train comes to this screeching halt, and it throws everybody. But because Serena is crouched down, she manages to kind of like get a chance to get up. So June and Serena are both on the ground. Everyone else is kind of flung as the train stops, and they manage to like get out to the back of the cart and into the other cart, and they lock in. This is the part where they do get away from the group, and June locks the door, and they have this moment. So at this point the train has come to a complete stop, and June says, "You have to go, you have to jump." And it looks like it's kind of down a deep hill, so it's kind of dark and hard to see, but she essentially just has to take a plunge into the wilderness, because it's either that or get eaten alive by these people that want to kill her. So June says to her, she tells her that she has to jump. They're going to hurt Noah. Listen to me, Serena. You have to get off the train. And Serena accepts it kind of begrudgingly. Like she really does not. She's like, "I have nowhere to go. I can't just jump off a train in the middle of the woods." The train starts to move again, and June tells her to go, and she gives her that nod of encouragement that we've seen before. That little, like when someone's on the brink of doing something, making a major move, taking a big action, um, and that nod from June as that encouragement to take that action, to take that plunge in the sense, is all that they've needed Serena needed a little bit more. So June gives her that nod of encouragement and she turns, but she hesitates. The glass breaks at the same time, and then June just pushes her right out the door. They make it through the door just in time to see that Serena's gone, and they call June a fucking traitor. And they leave her with her thoughts. And I don't know, it's hard. I mean, I think there's just so many emotions going on there. A, probably just killed her. Also, she didn't have another choice. Like, push her out the door and hope for the best. Likely she's dead. If not, she's in the wilderness. And what are you gonna do now? She really wanted to get rid of Serena now that she's done it. I mean, there's just a lot of emotions there. There's obviously still a lot that I think we're gonna unpack with the two of them through the season. And this was a really great way to kick it off and to sever it at the same time. So we'll see. I know you've probably already seen episode two, so we know that in episode two, obviously Serena's not dead. We know that. But we don't see them together. We just see them kind of in their parallel exile journeys. But I'm jumping ahead to a whole new episode, so let's reel back in and finish this episode here. The next scene. So June's kind of grappling with the weight of everything that just went down. So the bathtub gradually heated through the entire episode, got to a point where Serena was about to be boiled alive. She had to flee with an assist from June, and now June has to deal with that, but also peace. It's kind of like the first time that June's had a little bit of peace, because since the second she's boarded that train, she's been essentially reunited with Serena, and that wasn't necessarily welcome. And now that she's had to push her out of the train, that wasn't necessarily welcome either. And now she's just got to continue on this journey. And as much as she didn't want to be alone, now she's really alone. And you feel it here. Like, she didn't want to be with Serena, but she had somebody, at least somebody who was trying to help her regardless of whether she wanted it or not. Now she's got nobody. She's got absolutely nobody. We don't even know where she is when she wakes up in the next scene. It's just daytime and it's quiet. But there's one other thing in the scene that I just thought is kind of interesting. It's something to think about here. Uh, I definitely want to go back and just like focus in on just Holly's lifetime and what we've seen of Holly, Nicole, Daisy, Jade. Nicole, we'll call her Nicole. Sorry, I'm getting too excited about Holly at the end of this episode. We're gonna call this baby Nicole for this point, at this point. But Nicole, they get this one shot at Nicole and she's just screaming, and she can sense that this situation has gotten really untenable. And you can just see the trauma that's happening to this child. We know that her whole life has been nothing but trauma. June's entire pregnancy with her was trauma, and I can't believe this kid's still alive. She escaped, she had to cross a river underwater with Emily. She shows up in Canada and is handed off to strangers who then have to care for her. She's had nothing but displacement and like no attachment formed. So then June comes back, but June's like killing Fred and dealing with her own trauma and survival. Like there's just a lot to unpack in Nicole's short little life. And there was this one really, really horrible shot of her just screaming, and to know that we're going to be seeing her in the future in the testaments, it's just one of those like core moments for this child in this series. All right, we get the final scene of this episode. And it's June arriving in Alaska. June and Nicole wake up, and the train is completely empty, and there's someone saying, "Lady, get off, I gotta clean the train." There's such a beautiful shot of her getting off of this train, because the entire episode has been boxed in on this train, dark, watching just the landscape go by, and all of a sudden there's sun and the space feels so good. But she looks so small and so alone, and she's alone when she wakes up on the train, and she's alone on the walk to medical. And now she's got this beautiful shot of Alaska. They pull back and you've got the mountains and everything's really beautiful. You got the flag, it's the United States, and it's like supposed to be this poignant moment, but it just feels like she's just so alone, and she's literally by herself on this journey with this little stroller. And she's got this long, eventually you see like where her destination is, and she's going to medical. But as I'm watching this, that's all I'm consumed by, is just how alone she is, and how much she said at the end of season 5, like, I don't want to do this alone. And she says it again in this episode, I don't want to do this alone. And we've seen her have to do this alone for so much. And for her to just keep saying, I don't want to do this alone, and having to be put in a position where she's doing it alone again without any choice, is exhausting and relentless. And I was really focused on like just the desolate of the desolateness and the lack of funds that the situation had compared to every other time we've seen refugees make it into Canada, and there's a lot of resources for them. Emily had the whole hospital cheering for her, and Moira had like a cell phone and insurance and like all of these, like a package of a welcome package and a home and like things to, some money so she can eat. And it was like they were provided with resources, and here it's like the best they're getting is medical, and there's just a long long line. And I'm just watching this going, oh gosh, like the climate has changed, and that's all I'm consumed with is like June's experience and like just how much this destination is different than what we've seen and what that means moving forward. And I am not focused on the fact that they show Holly from the neck down and you got her walking in scrubs, and it feels like you should at least at that point be paying attention and say, who is that person walking towards her at the end of this episode? Obviously it's the end of the episode, something big's going to happen. I'm not thinking that. I'm just consumed by June and her plight. um so she gets in line with Nicole, and she like leans down and she has this moment with her, and she says, we're almost there. And in hindsight, I'm like, oh, we're almost there. You are so close to this monumental reunion. She says, we're going to get you some food and a diaper. And I'm like, my God, I just can't imagine being on a journey with a little child that small and not even having a diaper. Like that, I just, that line kind of took me out of like who that person was or what's happening in the end of the scene. I was just really could imagine how awful this would be. And so and you can just see it. And I mean, it's easy to imagine how awful it is because you can see it on her face. June looks exhausted. She looks in pain. Like her breathing is labored, her movements are labored. Like everything about this, you can feel the weight of it. It's literally bringing her down to her knees. Obviously, she's bending down to talk to Nicole. She kind of moves even further out of Nicole's eyesight and she just starts to cry. And you can just feel the weight of everything that she's been through, literally bringing her down to her knees. Then they should go back to Holly again, and still didn't recognize her as she's holding the list of passengers. Like I'm trying to like, I think I might have just already been overwhelmed. Once the clipboard fell, I think that's when my brain started to trigger of like, wait a second, something, this episode's not over yet. Like something's happening. What's going on? Oh my God. And then it's like all those little breadcrumbs from the whole episode, like kind of fell into place as you hear her voice say June Osborne. And like, oh, it just broke me. Like it's just such a welcome relief to say her name, especially like obviously it makes sense. Like she's calling her name. She's gonna what's she gonna say besides June Osborne? But we know the magnitude of names on this show and names and Holly, and she gets to tell her that this is their baby and she named it after her. Her name is Holly, and like the all of it was just racing through my mind once I finally figured out what was happening. And they give you so much time to take it all in as they watch June hear her mother's voice, and you see them see each other, and they're just walking towards each other and just taking in that moment and like getting their bearings. And I needed that moment because I also was getting my own bearings. And you get the final line of the episode, and it's mom. And if you still didn't know, and like this show has a lot of seasons, and if you were just tuning in first time ever at that point, because of the breadcrumbs and the way in which they've done this episode, you still know the monumental moment that this is, even without seeing any episode before, because that's all you need is for June to confirm that this is her mother, and that's it. It's so good. It just takes that one word to realize what this episode has been reiterating throughout, which is moms always come back, moms don't let go, babies need their moms. And here is June at her absolute lowest, or I don't know. I mean, she's been at a lot of absolute lowest, but this feels really, really new territory, rock bottom low for her. And to have this reunion at this point is just so, so needed and such a comforting moment, and absolutely going to be one of my favorite moments of the show forever. This episode was just incredible. You know what else it makes me think of? I just realized too, Janine, when she's at the Red Center, I think it's she wakes up after having her eye removed. She's just trying to serve coffee, and she's just kind of like goes to a completely different place. And Moira slaps her and says, snap out of it. You're at the Red Center, blah 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 blah, whatever she says. And I think it's at that scene, that one point that Janine says, I want my mom. And it was Janine at her own rock bottom at that moment saying that she just wants her mom. And so for June to get her mom at her rock bottom, it's just, it was so beautiful. It was just so well done. God, that music is so beautiful. You get this moment and this embrace, and you don't need any other words besides mom because the rest of that has already been explained. And they embrace, and the camera pulls up, and you get that overhead shot that is kind of cool. Like we see some really, really big moment overhead shots with embraces. then it pans up and you've got this whole new location with this reunion that has so many implications. And thank God they put all three episodes out at once because I can't imagine watching that and then not going straight into episode two. So, assuming everyone that watched this one has already watched two and three, I'm going to take a break from this now. We'll get into two and then three after that. So, thank you for joining me, sticking it out with me. Please let me know anything you think, anything that I missed, anything you think I got totally wrong. Be my Roxy and Scarlet and steer me in the right direction, please. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next episode.